In the spirit of Halloween, paranormal or not, what is the scariest, creepiest or most unsettling experience of your life? I've told this before. Went to my BF's house to sleep after working overnight. I'm under the covers to avoid the sunlight that was coming through the blinds, felt something tugging on my toe and tickling my foot. I laughed and told him to leave me alone so I could sleep. It stopped, I felt a hand grab my butt and I dozed off back to sleep, assuming that he came home early from work and was messing with me as usual. Hours later I woke up to find that I was alone, so I texted my BF and asked him where did he go. He responds that he's still at work and has been there since 5 a.m. TLDR, ghost played with my toe and copped a feel. I lived in a basement apartment so our windows were halfway up the wall / towards the top. I was falling asleep in my normal panties and a tank one windy night and heard the wind knock some branches against my window. I was annoyed at first but then realized that the branches were now seemingly trying to pop the screen off my window. I immediately stood up, scared shirtless, and got out of my room down the hallway. Problem was, windows lined the far wall of every single room. I got to the kitchen and heard someone trying to pop that screen off too. Darted towards the front door and heard someone trying to forcefully open the living room window that didn't have a screen. Full tilt ran back past my room to my roommate's room, who I didn't get along with, and busted in saying someone's trying to get in, wake up. As I said that, I saw someone's legs and heard heavy feet run past her window. She and her boyfriend had their window open with only the screen on it. He must have saw him in there and thought better of it and aimed for me. The cops came and said there were heavy footprint marks all up and down outside the windows. They never found the guy but advised me to put a motion sensor light in my window of my apartment. Horrifying. Most unsettling thing happened to me not too long ago, was recently in a car accident and been on medication to make my sleep more of a lull to better help my brain recover from a serious concussion. Anyways, had this super vivid nightmare of seeing a masked figure with a machete following me through a park. I turned around, stared at him and just sat down at a table. Someone randomly appeared next to me as dreams tend to do, and shouted, "Run Teresa, killer behind you." And I just sat there and said no, hush. I embrace death, silly, and in the most terrifyingly vivid manner had my neck slashed. Sharp ringing then filled my ears, and as my dream was from first person, even felt my sleeping body shake as the camera angle shifted down to match my neck giving way. This is probably the only time I've been terrified of my own suicidal ideology. Scares me to think of how I think in such a graphic way. TLDR, suicidal, had a dream about embracing death. Long time lurker here, but decided to create an account to share my story. I grew up in a house built in the early 1900s, and many strange things happened. Typical creepy stuff would happen, like doors opening and closing, and appliances turning on by themselves. But the most unsettling story that my parents still tell to this day happened to me when I was 5. My great-grandfather was a loving, boisterous man who loved to polka, and I can remember dancing in his arms. He passed away when I was 5, which was particularly hard on my mom, who lost her father as a teenager. This is what I remember of that night. I woke up in my twin bed with a jolt. This happened often to me living at our old house. I'd feel a tug at the blanket or something touching my arm. But nothing would be there. This time I woke and saw 2 children. Both were wearing fancy clothing, and I remember thinking they looked like they were going to get their first communion. They told me not to be afraid, and their names, George and Nora. They just wanted to visit and play with me, they said. I closed my eyes really hard and started to pray, and eventually fell back asleep. The next morning I told my mom about my strange dream and told her the names of the kids. I will never forget the look on my mom's face. I have goosebumps as I type. I knew my great-grandpa George, but Nora was the name of my great-grandmother. The story goes that when I was born, my great-grandmother was blind and nearing the end of her life. My mother said my grandma was upset she couldn't see me as I was a particularly beautiful baby, and she ended up passing away later that year after my birth. My mom has no idea how I would know my great-grandmother's name, but is convinced that it was her finally coming to see me. TLDR, I was visited by my great-grandparents after my great-grandpa's death. Gave my mom a heart attack when I told her I saw a ghost named after my grandma who I never heard of before. When I was around 16, my rapidly growing family finally moved from the house I had spent my entire life in. As you would expect, we spent a lot of time fondly remembering things we used to do in the house as we were packing everything up. At some point I decided to go into the downstairs closet with a flashlight and read, something I used to do when I was younger to get some peace and quiet. Now, this is one of those deep closets that goes under the stairs. It went back around 8 feet and then had a left turn into a very low, maybe 3-foot high space. This space was largely occupied by a mountain of old blankets and stuffed animals. Of course, this is the most fluffy spot to sit and read. About an hour in, I shift a little to get comfortable and I hear a low, slow, warped, hoarse voice say, "You always make me happy." I flipped my shit, hit my head on the low ceiling, and practically broke the door down getting out. After hyperventilating and explaining to my family why there was no color left on my face, I went back to see what it was. It was my stuffed little bear from when I was 3 or 4 years old that I happened to lean on just right to press his belly. When I pressed his stomach again though, nothing. This poor bear I hadn't played with since I was a toddler used the last of its power, used its dying breath to tell me I made it happy. You make me happy too, little bear. When you're not making me piss myself. On a hike with my 8-year-old daughter, we found ourselves in the path of a grizzly bear and her 2 cubs. When I was in the 5th grade, my neighbors, literally across the street from us, broke into our house twice. The first time, they did nothing. They literally just waltzed right in and took a peek at our stuff and left. When we got home, our chihuahua named Tiger, it had a brown body with black stripes, was locked in the bathroom closest to the front door. We couldn't believe it and went on about our lives. I remember wanting to stay home because I had a very strong feeling about something going to happen. I felt it in my balls. You know you are right if you feel it in your balls, but my mom said it was nothing. I told my dog to behave and left for school. When I got home, everything was gone and the wild house was splashed with water. They took the games, jewelry, some towels and even the fucking dog. They took Tiger with the fucking towels. Who the fuck does that? It came to fruition that my African American neighbors stole our stuff and decided to move out right afterward. Which didn't make sense to my father because he jokingly stated they were black and not Asians. This was not scary, but it was creepy. Probably going to get buried, but I have one. I got a cheap digital alarm clock from my great-grandfather for Christmas a couple of years ago. Kept it in my bathroom as a clock in there since I already have an alarm clock. On my birthday this year, as I'm lying in bed, I hear an odd digital beeping rendition of the birthday song. I go to investigate, it's the clock. Promptly took the batteries out and tossed it in the trash. There's no way it could have known my birthday, and I wasn't aware it could play that particular song. It did have song alarms at least. Creepiest part is that it was given to me by my great-grandfather who had passed away about 7 months before, so I don't know if it was his ghost or a spirit living in my apartment. Haven't had much paranormal activity since, so I think it may be the former. My boyfriend let me know about this thread and said I should post. I have a few stories, but I'll tell the 2 that stood out to me the most. One day I was home alone watching TV, it was late afternoon. I was about 13 or 14. In our living room there was a window to the kitchen over the TV. The light in the kitchen was on, so I went to shut it off as it was bugging my eyes watching TV. As I came around the corner of the kitchen, the light was on again. I went to shut it off, but their switch was in the off position. I returned to the couch a bit creeped out but assumed there was a logical explanation. The lights started flickering intensely as if someone was frantically flicking the light switch. I double-checked to make sure it was off, and as I was doing so the front door and the back door blew open at the same time. Again trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation, I closed and locked both doors, and brought my dog to my bed with me and watched TV in there. The second story happened around the same time, maybe months apart. I was babysitting my little brothers, so we were the only ones home. I was having trouble sleeping, rolled over to check my phone and it was 3 a.m. I heard footsteps in the hallway. They ran to the bathroom and flicked the lights on, then ran back. I assumed it was my littlest brother, so, frustrated, I got up and flicked the lights off and went back to bed. This happened about 4 or 5 more times. I was getting irritated, but they were always scared, so I assumed they just didn't want to shut the lights off on the way back to bed. My younger brother texted me and said, "Sarah, I'm scared." I asked if littlest brother was sleeping and he said yeah. Trying to play brave big sister, I just told him it was me so he didn't panic, but needless to say I did not sleep that night. When my boyfriend heard these stories, he couldn't imagine how I didn't freak out, but I've always had a very logical brain and assume even though I don't have a scientific explanation right now, there is one I don't know yet. TLDR, ghosts like to fuck with lights.